Welcome, Taylor Lorenz. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It is our pleasure. So, you released a definitely not at all controversial article on Wired. Nobody's talking about it.
She has a way of staying out of the limelight.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
just her thing.
So, just to give everybody some of the basics, there's this Democratic Creator Incubator program called Chorus. And Brian Tyler Cohen and I believe one other person co-founded it, and it's funded by this liberal dark money group called the 1630 Fund. And I highly recommend you guys go read the entire thing. Taylor, the first thing I want to ask you is, so apparently they can't acknowledge the group. The people in the group can't acknowledge the group. So there's no transparency, there's no disclosure. Some of those creators have come out and they basically said like, well, we can acknowledge the group and we did acknowledge the group. So what is your reaction to those creators saying that?
They're doing this thing that's actually kind of a sleight of hand, sleight of word. Basically, what they're doing is they're acknowledging the public group. So Chorus itself has always been public. I mean, it was quite literally launched with a big New York Times splashy profile. I've written public other stories about Chorus. So Chorus itself was never a secret. And you'll notice these creators being like, I can talk about being in Chorus. Here's the website. Sure you can. What we are saying was not public, and we know is not public because none of them spoke about it before the article, was this specific funding program with, and also the fact that Chorus itself is a project, according to these contracts, of the 1630 Fund. So when they say that it's been public, what they're talking about is just like the public-facing Chorus program and idea, but not the like paid incubator sort of thing that I reported on.
What have you broadly made of the reaction? Because quite frankly, I've found it a bit shocking.
It's insane. So what's so wild to me is I didn't even think this story would come to fruition because I worked on it. I mean, I've been working on it for like 2 months, but like I reached out to Chorus with this really detailed, request for comment, and same with 1630. And I assumed that they would just like call up the Washington Post and like give them the story and do an announcement on their own terms and give access to their creators and be like, we're so excited to launch this program and don't pay attention to that little funding, who's funding us, whatever. When they didn't. And instead they went like ballistic and they're accusing me of being funded by Russia and like have all these conspiracies about my like investigative journalism fellowship. And like, I actually think I was talking to another reporter about this yesterday. It makes it seem like they have even more to hide because their response has been so deranged.
Yeah, probably the most disgusting thing that I saw was from Brian Tyler Cohen, who was like, pulled one clip of Candace Owens being like, well, I respect that she says what she believes or something like that. In conversation with Tucker Carlson, they're like, well, she's friends with Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. I thought, and again, I thought it was very revealing because if there was genuinely a problem with your reporting, then you say, okay, well, here's the actual contract. Here's what she got wrong. Here's how I can prove what she got wrong. And instead it was all of this misdirection of conflating things, of personally attacking you, accusing you of being the one who's really paid. Oh, and you're a secret Trumper, which is just completely ridiculous. There was also a lot of, let me respond to this thing that someone randomly on the internet said, rather than the actual reporting that you engaged in. And so to me, it was very revealing. I don't know how you can call yourself someone who is even left of center and not at least grapple with the ethical and moral questions that are raised by accepting secret, dark super PAC money.
Well, they don't even want to deal with those questions. Like they just want to sort of sling mud and make these claims. And, something I have said from the jump is if we got something wrong, reach out. Wired has a corrections policy. Like, show us any evidence that what we reported is not fact. It's been over a week. There's not a single correction on the story because none of them have disproved a single thing in our article. They've just been on this other like tour, sort of just throwing everything at the wall to see what would stick. On Threads, one of the creators was literally calling implying that the term dark money is racist. Like that's how.
Oh my God.
I'm not kidding. Like that literally, like it's like parody level. And
that was the other one that got me, is they had to not disclose their secret dark money funding to protect trans creators in red states. I was like, what? Okay, what are we doing?
Let, let me,
David Pakman and Brett, like these are people with like, what?
So in the reporting, just to lay out for everybody out there, so according to your reporting, there are restrictive clauses in the contract. For example, they have to funnel all bookings with lawmakers and political leaders through Chorus. So it's almost like giving over some semblance of your autonomy and your independence to this group. You can't support or oppose politicians without Chorus's approval, which I thought, when I read that one, I was like, I don't know why more people aren't talking about this particular portion, because that seems crazy to me. To say, I mean, that's insane. So why don't you talk a little bit about the restrictive clauses that you came across?
Yeah, there's a bunch of restricted clauses, like sort of some of what you just mentioned. They sort of narrow some of it by saying like with Chorus funds, right? So like, oh, we don't care if you do things without Chorus funds, but the idea is that this is the funding that you're receiving to like make a living, and you're investing a huge amount of time in this. So like, it's very silly, sort of like these separations that they try to make. You know, they also have restrictions on sort of how you can talk about other people in the program. And this is something that creators in the group chats that we got screen recordings of were also debating. For instance, say one of your, the colleagues in the program or several colleagues in the program push misinformation about a war or something, and you want to speak negatively about that. Like theoretically under this document, it appears that they would not be able to criticize the other members of the program. And, you know, there's just a few things like that as well that just, to me as a journalist, like I would never sign an agreement like this, because clearly there is some, you know, you are agreeing to certain terms that I think that, you know, anybody who considers themselves like a honest journalist would not do, or at least certainly not do without disclosure.
Yeah. They should never sign that contract. Even if they don't enforce the things that are on the paper there, you should never sign the contract. In fact, in the article, you say one person, they didn't let one person's lawyer redline the contract. They basically were like, no, we're not allowing your lawyer to look at it and make adjustments and send it back to us. Basically like, take it or leave it, which is very heavy-handed for this sort of thing. I mean, that's like very authoritarian for these sorts of negotiations, right?
Well, I have spoken to like managers and agents who have had problems with Chorus in the past. And this was in my last story, because I think managers and agents, like their job is to advocate for their talent, right? And to like get the best deal possible. And previously, Chorus had used images of content creators without their consent, like just took people's images off social media and put them in their fundraising decks as if those people were like somehow affiliated with Chorus, and then use that to raise money and do the stuff. And so, and then in terms of the negotiating of this deal as well, I spoke to a couple managers and agents that were like, yeah, I would never let my client sign something like that, because we want to make sure that we have a deal that works for my client specifically.
The other thing that was crazy to me is the top tier was getting $8,000 a month. That's a lot of money. Although if you're David Pakman, it's actually not a lot of money. But for most people, it's a lot of money. Some of these people are getting $250 a month. Like, and there's a lot of work that's involved. You have to go to a daily messaging check-in and these weekly things, and you got to run this by them, and you can't do that, and you can't do that. What are, like, why are they selling out so cheap? What are they thinking they're getting for this like $250 a month?
There's nobody else offering them anything. That's why. That would explain it to me, right, Taylor?
I think yes, and I think it's like the allure of like working with the other big creators, feeling part of this program, getting access. Like you'll see a lot of, like, I look at this girl's, there's one of the girls that has this like pro-Democrat, like, you know, DNC apologia, like American Girl doll meme page, and I'm just like, what would possess someone to run an account like this?
Those words don't even make sense together as like a pairing. I don't know what that means, but go ahead.
She's on the highest tier, to be clear. She's on the highest tier, okay?
Wow.
Wild. But if you look at the content on her page, it's literally just like her hanging out with Chuck Schumer, you know, in the like in Congress, being like, hey girlies, like I'm here, you know, with like these guys. And so they clearly thrive on like access and this sort of like feeling like they're part of this DC in crowd. And, you know, a bunch of these people, that seems to be what they like really live for. And I don't know why else you would sort of sign some of these agreements. You know, aside from that, I mean, maybe you want to network, you want to be part of it. Like I did talk to another person that didn't take the deal, actually, that got offered that low amount, that was like, I'm not doing it for that. But was considering it because they were like, well, Brian Tyler Cohen's really powerful in the space, and like maybe he'll have me on his channel, right? Like maybe that will boost me somehow. Like these big creators do wield power, and I think they sort of, that allure is appealing to certain people.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
I think the point that triggered me the most reading your article is somebody says that the goal of Chorus is to, quote, build new infrastructure to fund independent progressive voices online at scale. That word, independent, has been so bastardized, and it makes me absolutely furious. It has to mean something, and if you're taking dark money, if you're taking billionaire money, that's like the opposite of independent. Independent has to mean something, and the fact that even knowing you're reporting, somebody could say that back to you, like, oh no, we're trying to create independent. It's like, what are we doing here? This is so backwards.
Yeah, because it's like astroturfing kind of like a program together. And in my opinion, I went independent for my field, and obviously I still write for a lot of mainstream media, but I really wanted to like be able to truly be like independent supported primarily, like maybe it was like 8 or 9 months ago, whenever I left the Washington Post. I think that disclosure is so key. And if you're going to be independent, and if you're going to sell yourself as independent, you need to be open with your audience and say, listen, like I am 95% supported by you. Like maybe I agreed to this program, but here's why. And, here's the full, I'm not under any editorial control, and here's like the full information about it, and be open with your audience. I think the problem here is it's like this sort of backroom deals. And then they're presenting themselves online as, we're just normal independent creators.
Yeah, to me, that's what it comes down to as well, because the transparency piece, because like, this show that Kyle and I do is like as pure as it's completely reader supported. Kyle and I both in our separate shows have a policy. We'll never talk to an advertiser. We're not doing the Hims ads or Casper mattresses or like whatever, Blue Chew.
Fleshlights like Rogan used to do.
I see Sam Cedar out there selling a bidet. Like we're going to not do, but I also, like for the work that you do, your work is very expensive. It takes time. You have to go and do the investigative journalism. You're not going to be churning out a daily take the way that I can just sit in front of a camera and be like, here's what I think about X, Y, or Z. So I understand why people make somewhat different choices in terms of the financing of what they're doing than I've made. But to me, the key is like, you at the very least have to be transparent about that. And I wonder how you think about it, because, obviously you were at the Washington Post. I was once upon a time at MSNBC. So we've seen the inside of how these things work at mainstream institutions. And for all of our critiques of legacy media, there is a firewall between the people who are selling ads and the journalists who are doing the reporting, or the anchors who are live on air. Like when I was at MSNBC, I had nothing to do with the ad department, the sales department. I had no idea what ads were playing during the commercial break. And part of my fear with the shift away from mainstream sources and towards independent personalities and creators and journalists is that you're actually getting an even more sort of like directly corrupt relationship in many instances.
Yeah, this is something that I think about a lot because, I have one brand deal with Delete Me, which is a product I've used for literally, I think, half my life because I've been doxxed so many times. But it's really hard. Like, first of all, not only do no brands want to sponsor like investigative journalists and people constantly ensnared in controversy, and not in a positive way. But it's also like there's so much that I've turned down, so many opportunities that I've turned down because I think it would just be unethical of me as a journalist, and I feel like it would put me in a weird space. I write a lot about privacy, for instance, and civil liberties online, and there's a lot of products that harvest data or do weird things, and I just think it's like this problem that I don't think that. I think people just watch YouTubers and they think everyone operates like as YouTubers, and they don't understand that actually it's really hard for journalists. Like I was talking to a content creator yesterday who didn't realize that like journalists at mainstream institutions like couldn't make outside income. They were like, well, what about all this? And I'm like, no, like you can't do any of that. That's the whole thing is you work there and you sign these agreements, and it's kind of liberating. You don't have to worry about that. You're getting a salary from a media org.
Yeah. So I was, of course, not approached by these people, probably because every day on my show I talk about how I've never talked to an advertiser, never talked to a billionaire, never done an ad read, never talked to a PAC, never talked to a government. Like, I go through this whole spiel of, like, I try to fund this as pure as I possibly can. So it would make sense why they wouldn't reach out to me.
And you talk about Gaza all the time.
Well, hold on. Well, let me get to my question here.
Okay.
Because it's not just me, though. I'm pretty sure they didn't reach out to Mike Figueredo of the Humanist Report. I'm pretty sure they didn't reach out to David Dowell. When you look at the size of my channel, the size of their channels, Hassan Piker's another example, streaming on Twitch, probably the biggest political live streamer in this space. They didn't reach out to him. So, kind of weird, isn't it? That you're doing this democratic thing, left-wing, liberal thing in theory, and it's like, we got to try to, get the message out there, spread the good word. But some of the biggest left-leaning creators, who everybody I just mentioned supports the Democrats over the Republicans. We have criticisms of the Democrats, but if you give me a Democrat versus the fascist in the White House now, 10 out of 10 times I'm going to pick the Democrat. But why is it that they didn't reach out to any of those people? Is it because they know that it's a shady funding model and we might have ethical issues with it? Or is it because they know we don't comply with their policy platform perfectly? Which we'll get to a separate question on the policy platform in a second. But why do you think it is that people like us never got an email, never got a text message, never got a phone call when we're some of the bigger creators on the left in this space?
This is a question that I put to both Chorus and the 1630 Fund. And I asked, like, what is your criteria, or like, can you disclose any information about this program? Because I think this is, again, why we need transparency. We have no idea why they selected the creators that they do. I think all we can do is look at the creators that have been made public and look at sort of commonalities between them and make our best guess. Because they have not been transparent since either. They still refuse to release the full roster of content creators. There are content creators out there that are part of this program that have not, that were not named in the article, that we couldn't confirm, but that are taking this money, right? And so I think it's just really bad for this space. And I think it's just, it shows, I think, it shows some sort of editorial discretion on who they're partnering with, right? But we just don't have any idea of what qualifications they had. And I think, and also what influence, an organization, like what influence, for instance, did the 1630 Fund, this is something I asked, like have any influence on what creators were chosen? Like these are all questions that we would love answered, and we have gotten zero transparency. And
Taylor, they allude to a policy platform at a certain point in the contract. And we know that because somebody tried to debunk what you were saying, but they showed some of the contract and actually validated what you were saying. And the fact that there's a policy platform, that's something that they have not really engaged with at all, because what that says is there are certain things that we believe in and certain things we don't believe in. And we can make inferences based on who's in the platform or who's with the group and who's not with the group. And so, for example, Crystal, you brought up Gaza, and it's like, I don't know, when you go through, and some of those creators I genuinely like. I've been on Brian Tyler Cohen's show. I like his show. I think a lot of the time his messaging is genuinely good. I think his Twitter feed is good, but he's notably absent, largely talking about Gaza. He either doesn't talk about it, or every now and then maybe there's like a token mention of it. But like, that seems like an inference we can make. And until they would need to release that policy platform and show us what's in it in order for us to know, hey, how are you picking people, and like, what are the standards that you're picking people by,
Exactly. And I think that's the thing that I was hoping that this article could bring, right? Like, ideally, they would have answered those questions prior to publication. And at the very least, when the story came out, just been like, hey, we want to clear some things up. We've seen a lot of misconceptions. Here's our policy platform. Here's how we chose these creators. Here's this process. And by the way, like, that would have been great. Like, that would have been more transparency in the space. Instead, they reacted the opposite way, and they've gaslit and attacked people and made all these personal attacks against me. It's the opposite of transparency. And I think it sets a terrible precedent for just broader Democrat behavior in this space.
Yeah. The other thing I think is, even if you have no ethical qualms, like, is this going to work? Like the American Girl doll meme, DNC, is this how we're winning back young men? Like, what are we, because, and I love it, you've done so much work on the right-wing influencer and media, and you talked about, tenant media scan and all of these things. Can you sort of compare and contrast the approach from the Democratic Party, which seems to be very top-down, very, almost
from the ground up
authoritarian,
too. Yeah.
like, these people don't criticize us, so we're good with them, and we're only going to put Hakeem Jeffries on with someone who's going to do a softball interview, and like just sort of trying to create it from nothing, versus the Republicans, who seem to look more at like, oh, well, what's popping and what's working, and actually tolerate a little bit more sort of messiness in that ecosystem, so long as at the end of the day, it's like you're going to vote for Donald Trump and you're going to vote for the Republicans.
Well, I think the fact that Olivia Juliana is in the highest paid tier of this program is kind of revealing, because this is somebody that is, I cannot tell you, like she has no real organic audience. Like her audience is like 58-year-old consultants, you know, that like, that are like maybe like Liz Cheney's of the world, honestly. So, you know, it's very strange. These are not content creators, many of them, that have like cultural capital. They're people who just make sort of promo videos with these politicians, and like you mentioned, I mean, they're just not resonating with like the target demographics that Democrats need. And oh my God, I completely forgot my thought because I'm just first thing in the morning. There was one other thing I was going to say.
That's it. We're comparing and contrasting with the Republicans and how they
operate
and what that might be. Yeah.
So here's something that Tina Nguyen, who's a really great reporter at The Verge, and she and Mia Sato, another phenomenal reporter at The Verge, both of them cover influencers. They had this great conversation on The Verge yesterday where they were talking about, like, Tina used to be part of the Republican machine. She did this like right-wing Koch-backed fellowship or something in college, and she wrote a book about it. And she was talking about how, like, you know, even something like Turning Point USA compared to the Koch network, like the Koch network actually has a lot less relevance today because it was seen as this like shadowy billionaire funded thing. And like people didn't like that. Whereas Turning Point has always been very like open. They have the content creators put Turning Point in their bio. It's this big public thing. Everyone knows who's involved, and it sort of invites people to join the movement. And that has been significantly more successful. And I think when you look at like the Democrats, they're in that like, first of all, they can't cede an ounce of control. They want to replicate the access sort of control ecosystem that they have with the traditional media. And it's ineffective, and it just doesn't work because this is the internet and people can build their own audiences. And they think if they withhold access to enough politicians, they can control who's popular online. It's not going to work.
That's actually a great point. I never thought of it like that. That it's true. Charlie Kirk, and he is a party hack. There's no doubt about it. Everybody knows that. But he's out in the open party hack. And that is different than like kind of hiding it. And it's almost like, you know, these Democratic influencers, it would be an upgrade to do like, we're going to have our big Chorus USA conference and everybody come and we have speakers.
Fund conference.
Yeah, because that would take away the power of the, why are you hiding this? Why is this not transparent? Why is this dark money?
Yeah.
And it would invite people in too.
Right.
Like there's so many creators that didn't even know about this.
Right.
Totally. Yeah.
The other thing I was thinking about is like maybe part of why there's so much interest in like the top-down control on the Democratic side is because a left-wing ideology is genuinely a threat to the billionaire class in a way that a right-wing ideology is not. So there's a desperation around keeping their grip on all of the, you know, tightly controlling the Democratic Party. Whereas with the Republican Party, they know that whether it's Trump or whoever, J.D. Vance or whoever comes after, there's no real threat to capital there. And so I think that might be part of the specific billionaire funder dynamic that's going on between the two parties too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the bigger issue, which is very much sort of an extension of that, is that the Democratic Party platform is just not popular with most people. And if you look at who's popular online on the left, it's a lot of anti-establishment people. It's people who espouse more populist policies, economic populism. And they hate that. Like, they do not like that. Like, they complained for months about, you know, how the Democrats have no hype and no one likes them. Zoran Mamdani comes along. And there's party leaders that are still refusing to endorse them. Even just the Democrats finally tweeted some milquetoast thing about him like yesterday, finally, months later. So you can see this even with candidates like Zoran or I forgot the other, Omar Fattah, I think. These insurgent candidates that like actually are resonating with people. But instead of pouring gasoline on that fire and recognizing that that the sort of Democratic elite policy agenda sucks and isn't popular, they don't want to do that. They just want to control access.
Yeah, and to that point, here's another part from the article that I found very interesting. Quote, these people are expected to attend regular advocacy trainings and daily messaging check-ins. Those messaging check-ins are led by Brian Tyler Cohen on rapid response days. I honestly could think of worse people to control Democratic messaging. I actually think his Twitter feed is pretty good, if I'm being honest. But the creators also have to attend at least 2 Chorus newsroom events per month, which are events Chorus plans often with lawmakers. Now, when I read that part, I had alarm bells going off all over the place, because what that means is, hey, this week we have Hakeem Jeffries with us to help us with messaging. And there's not a single honest person on the liberal left Democratic side who likes Hakeem Jeffries. Everybody thinks he's failing. Everybody realizes this guy's not fit for the moment. He doesn't know how to fight. His ideology sucks. He's bought by AIPAC completely. You know, you look at people like Hakeem Jeffries, you look at people like Chuck Schumer, they're not popular. And so if you're doing this program and then you're inviting in Democrats who nobody knows or are doing a bad job or suck at leadership, effectively I view that as an attempt to co-opt these influencers, where it's like, well, now you were just in a messaging thing with Hakeem. Are you really going to criticize him? Are you really going to focus on that? Are you really going to try to course correct for the direction of the Democratic Party? You were just in the room with the leader, like you're on the inside now, even though you might have a TikTok with 8,000 followers and make $250 per month. It really reads to me like an attempt to co-opt the grassroots and have the top, like you said, control the messaging, as opposed to how it should work, which is sort of bottom up, what's actually popular, what actually makes people clap and enjoy it, and they're not doing that.
Well, they